Welcome back, everybody. And if you are just joining us, particularly if you are joining us from the United States or anywhere that's further west than Europe, good morning and welcome to the Futuremakers Forum 2022. We are about to hear a rather special panel. We're going to talk about resilience and well-being around personal and entrepreneurial resilience and well-being. And before we get the panel going, of which I can see them all lined up beautifully, ready to go in the wings, we're going to hear a rather special short video. So Farah Williams, MBE, former Liverpool FC, so football club, women's and England women's footballer, could not join us in person today, but she has shared a rather special video for us to get us all thinking about resilience. This is quite personal, so please do get ready for this video. She's got some great advice in here for us, and then when Farah's finished, we'll hand over to Henry Bay, who's our moderator. So hopefully Farah's video for us is all lined up and ready to go in the wings for us today. And if you haven't already, do jump into the chat, introduce yourselves, get ready to ask your questions and share your insights. We are here for you. That's what it's all about. Hopefully, sorry, I should have turned my video. Hopefully we should be all ready for you.
Hi, I'm Farah Williams, former Liverpool FC and England women's footballer. I made 35 appearances for Liverpool ladies between the seasons 2012 and 2015, and I have played 172 times for my country. I'm so pleased to be part of Futuremakers Forum 2022. I'm just going to share with you some of stories of mine of where I had to show resilience through my journey. I'll start when I was really young, at the age of 17. I become homeless whilst playing football, which meant I found myself in a hostel where financially I found myself in great difficulty. But I trusted in the process, and I trusted in, the support I had around me at the time. Obviously I left with nothing, was in a hostel. So, being able to provide myself with food, training equipment to go to football, became really difficult for me. But with the support I had around me, it certainly made me stronger, made me realize a lot about myself, a lot about life. And really made me stronger. Another time when I had to be resilient, and I say resilient, when you're a sports person, you wanna succeed all the time, and you want to be a part of, the success that's in front of you. And I was very used to being, chosen and selected in most England squads, most of my club team squads, and not just being selected, but playing, starting in every game. And I remember the 2012 Olympics that were here in England, where I was hoping to play, a big part of the squad. And the day before the game, I remember getting dropped from the 11, which meant I spent most of the time as a sub. And for the first time in my career, I had to learn how to be resilient with that, how to stay strong, how to trust in, the ability that I had as a player, and what qualities I had as a player and a person, because I had to be a good teammate, although, really struggling with the fact that, I really wanted to get on the pitch and play. So I think for the first time, learning how to be a sub and a good person outside of, just playing the game. I think those earlier days where I spoke about, when I was homeless and had to find resilience and be strong, similarly it happened to me in 2012 in the Olympics, where I had to find that strength to, go through a tournament where I knew that I wasn't going to play a major part on the pitch. So yeah, there are probably two times in my journey where I've had to show real, strength and resilience through difficult periods in two different scenarios. If I could give any advice to anybody, having learned from my experiences of, needing resilience, especially as I mentioned there in the 2012 Olympics, I think you've got to, one, trust your own ability in whatever it might be. Obviously mine was in football, and I knew I had great qualities as a footballer. I knew I was a good teammate. And sometimes when things don't go your way, you tend to believe the negativity around those decisions that are made. But, sport in general and life is around, decisions and opinions, and not all of them will meet yours. And I learned that, certainly for me in football, the opinion at the time wasn't the same as mine, but I knew it didn't change, the qualities that I had. And I think, in that period, it was something certainly that I drew on, to allow me to remain confident in what I knew I was very good at. I think if I didn't trust in myself, and that inner strength that I had, that I'd built over time, I would have found it a lot more difficult than what I did. I want to say a huge thank you to Standard Chartered Bank for your continued support for Futuremakers.
Well, that was a rather special introduction to this session. So without further ado, I want to hand over and bring in our wonderful moderator, Henry Bay, who's had his own resilience challenges this morning, because Henry isn't beaming in from where he hoped to be beaming in from at all. Hi, Henry.
Absolutely.
How are you? Welcome to Futuremakers Forum 2022.
Thank you very much, Katie. It's such a pleasure and honor for me to be here. I believe that we've had a wonderful day so far in terms of the forum that we've had, some of the conversations that have been going on, and I think that what you probably would have seen is a clear showcasing of what Standard Chartered truly believes in and what Standard Chartered truly stands for when we say we're here for good. And I'm excited about what I'm hearing. Katie, I was listening to the tail end of the last conversation, and I could feel the vibe, I could feel the energy, and I could feel the impact that this is all making. The bank has been very clear in its purpose. It stated it's here for good agenda. Now that here for good agenda, as you can imagine, it's a very, very powerful driving force for the bank. And in the course of that, we have dealt comprehensively with the question of, as an organization, can we be here to make profit and still be here for good? And I think Futuremakers is a great expression of how we bring that together. Some of you would know that the bank recently published what it calls its bold stance, in which we have integrated everything we do for good with our strategy. And so I'm really, really excited, and I can tell you that the bank is really excited about Futuremakers and what we can do with it, because Futuremakers enables us to tackle inequality. I think one of the biggest problems in the world is inequality, and also to promote greater economic inclusion. And the category of people that we have chosen to focus on, women and girls, for me is really, really powerful, because there is a Ghanaian educator of many years ago who said, when you educate a man, you educate an individual, but when you educate a woman, you educate a whole nation. And that's something I've always believed in. I've always believed in the contribution that we can make in that respect. And I can say that today we have a wonderful selection of a panel for the conversation that we're about to engage. Let me first of all say that the conversation we're about to engage on, how can young people build resilience and well-being in personal and entrepreneurship environments to set them up for success, is underpinned by some statistics that I'd like to share with you. So 35% of young people who were surveyed, about 1,200 of them, said that they rarely or they never had money left over at the end of each month. A further 35% of them said they only sometimes had money at the end of the month. For 30%, an unexpected gift would always, too often, put strain on their finances. And for a further 40%, it will sometimes put a strain on their finances. A third of young people said that their difficult financial circumstances always or often control their lives. Now, that's the one that struck me, that their financial circumstances controlled their life. And if you just listen to the wonderful, very vulnerable testimonial that Farah just shared with us, you can see how some of these adversities that we face can actually put us in a situation where we could either recover or we could be finished. But this forum is about how then do we build that resilience in entrepreneurship, in the financial management of our enterprises and so on. That positions us to come out strong like Farad did. And I have here with me an amazing panel. And I'd like to first start by just mentioning them briefly and giving them the opportunity to introduce themselves. We have here today Kezia Hudson, who is doing some amazing work, has been hugely involved with Silicon Valley's emerging startup, and I'm going to let her talk a bit about herself. And then we have Dr. Anne-Marie Imafidon, who, the thing that struck me when I was reading about Anne-Marie is the fact that she's one of the people we describe as prodigies, and amazing personality when you read about it. And I'm going to leave her to talk about it. She's exciting to listen to. And we do also have with us today Kiara O'Flynn, who is a beneficiary who's participated in our Futuremakers programs and is going to share some very personal stories with us about the impact that this has made. I am so looking forward to this exciting conversation. And I can tell you that I'm doing this from the lounge of an airport because I've been stuck at Heathrow, my favorite airport, where I always get stuck. But I'm really excited about what we're going to have discussed today. And I'm really looking forward to it. So I'm going to start with you, Kezia. Kezia, if I asked you to describe yourself in a few words, what would you be telling us about yourself?
Good morning, Henry, and good morning, everyone. It's a testament to our commitment when we're in places like stuck at airports, trying to make this still happen, right? Hello, everybody. Good morning from New York. My name is Keisha Hudson. I am the managing director for the Standard Chartered's Women's Tech Incubator, located at the Zahn Innovation Center. We are based at the City College of New York. And through our partnership with Standard Chartered, we are providing opportunities to young women around entrepreneurship. We have a startup competition that we run annually, giving them the opportunity to win funding to launch their business. We have mentorship programs, elective courses, special events. And yesterday we kicked off our summer program for high school girls called Boss Girls, teaching them about entrepreneurship. I'm really excited today to be here on this panel and to discuss resiliency with everyone. Thank you.
Dr. Anne-Marie.
Thank you, Henry, and hi everyone from London, not too far away from you, although not sat in Heathrow Airport, I promise. I'm Anne-Marie. I run an organisation called Stemets, who are also a Futuremakers, a Standard Chartered Futuremakers partner, and we are working to encourage, to support, to engage, inform, and connect the next generation of women with STEAM, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and maths. And for us, we see that whole field as not just industry, but also academia, and of course, entrepreneurship. And so across a number of different programs that we've been doing and interventions that we've been running with Standard Chartered, we've been able to engage lots of young people across the UK with some of those STEAM skills and STEM skills with a view to employment. But of course, summer holidays are coming up, so we're a little bit behind you over there in New York with our summer holidays. And so we'll all kick off next month our Outbox Entrepreneurs program, which is all around entrepreneurship skills, incubation, and funding for young women, for those who have business ideas and those who don't yet have business ideas, but want to be able to kind of refine those skills and be able to take agency in their lives, really, based off what entrepreneurship can bring them, but also where STEAM and STEM and arts meets entrepreneurship. So really excited to be joining the panel today. Great to kind of see everybody tuning in from lots of different places in the chat, and really hoping we're able to give folks some really powerful nuggets to take back in terms of that resilience to do with money, but also resilience to do with well-being. So yeah, thanks again for having me joining you all.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie. Kiara, would you like to say a couple of things as well?
Hi guys, so I'm Kira. As you can probably tell from the accent, I'm Irish, but I'm actually currently joining you from Croatia. Traveling Europe at the moment, so since we're naming the places we're all tuning in from. And yeah, so I'm a young university student and I run a social entrepreneur project called Any Time of the Month, which works to alleviate period poverty and to seek period injustice in our environments, both in Ireland and internationally. So we work on kind of creating a conversation around menstruation because, as you all can imagine, there isn't one. And it's so important that we initiate this conversation because it's integral to young people's health and to kind of get rid of the inequalities surrounding women in the workplace and in school environments. So yeah, and of course I'm part of the Futuremaker Forum today, and I'm so excited. I always have a little bit of imposter syndrome when I attend things like this, so I'm absolutely so delighted to be here today, and I hope I can share some insight with you guys and learn a few things as well.
Well, every time you feel like you have an imposter syndrome, know that you're in good company, because all of us feel like that. Let me just say, there is a saying by Robert Schuller, which has almost become a cliche now, that tough times don't last, but tough people do. Tough times don't last, tough people do. And I think sometimes when I think about resilience, this is one of the things that's always in my mind, that life is full of adversity. And when you listen to what Farah just shared with us, life indeed is full of adversity, and it's full of the unexpected, and it's full of things that happen not the way we planned it, and that's what this conversation is about today. So I'm going to start first of all by asking each of our panelists to talk a little bit about what does being resilient and looking after your well-being really mean to you. What does being resilient and looking after your well-being really mean to you? And I'm going to start off with Anne-Marie, if you may.
Sure. I mean, it's a great question. What is resilience? What does it mean to me? I mean, for me, it's that bounce back ability, right? And I think, as you just had in the quote, bad times are going to happen. There will be times when, as an entrepreneur, as a human being, you run out of money, you run out of resources, you sometimes, unfortunately, run out of time. And there are all kinds of different things that could go wrong at any given point. But I think it's nothing ventured, nothing gained. And so resilience is being able to cope with those things and bounce back every time that happens and have it as part of the process. So I think for me, resilience actually means looking for those mistakes. It means looking for those things that are going to go wrong, and rather than avoiding them and being afraid of when mistakes and kind of failures might come, it means leaning into them and saying, what am I learning from this? What is this teaching me? What am I gonna be able to measure? Almost like an experiment, right? We've done an experiment, we didn't know which way it was going to go. Now we've got the result and it's maybe not as great as we hoped. What are we learning and what are we taking back into the next experiment? So for me, resilience is all about that. And I think that there's kind of, when an experiment goes wrong, you learn the lesson, but when it goes right, then you're able to see that there's value in what you've done. You're able to understand the value that you might bring to the different scenarios that you're in. And so it's that kind of, one way or another, or somewhere in the middle, because it's never really clean cut. Sometimes it's a gray area, what happened as a result of that experiment or that venture. You're able to kind of take that back in and have that as part of this cyclical loop. So I think for me, that's a lot of what resilience is about. And being prepared for those experiments means, giving yourself the space to practice, giving yourself the space to do your research, and actually ensure that as you're starting this experiment, you're starting, from the best place possible. As you start your venture, as you begin your career, as you start a new week at work, or you start a new week at school or college or university. So I think for me, that's what resilience means. But well-being comes into it in giving yourself the space, right? Giving yourself that opportunity to kind of under-promise, over-deliver, and actually giving yourself the time, giving yourself space, budgeting for that space to say, rather than, planning 100% of my day, I'm going to plan 75% of it. And actually, if I do more than that, that's okay. That's a bonus. But again, I'm giving myself that space for things to not go right, giving myself that space to be human, but also giving myself that space to do the things that nourish me. Because again, you can't fill from an empty cup. And I think that's the other thing that you often get tied up as an entrepreneur or as someone in leadership or someone that's trying to do good, right? We're almost like, oh, it's really important to do the good. It's really important to build the business. It's really important to do the do. Whereas actually, if you don't have the energy, if you don't have the well-being, then you're not going to be able to stand that resilience on anything. And so I think being intentional about how you use that time, time is a more finite resource than money, right? You can make more money, you can't make more time. And so how are we intentional with our time in our well-being? How are we learning and exploring what nourishes us? Where do we get our energy from, right? Where are we nurtured from? And so for me, that's the resilience. That's the link between the resilience and well-being. And that's how I try to approach them. But again, no one's perfect and you have to give yourself grace. And so again, that's it. Like, I don't always get the time to, have meditation, to pray in the morning, to work out in the morning, to drink all the water. But it's about having that intention to say, here's what I'm going to do to ensure. And, when I don't sleep well, I'm less likely to do the exercise, right? Or when I don't have my cup on the table, I'm less likely to drink the water. So what are the things that I can do to ensure that I'm setting myself up to have the right well-being in order to be the most resilient? So that's what the two mean to me.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie. This is the first time I've heard this definition of well-being, giving yourself space and time. That's such a rich gift. Now, I'm going to go to Kesia.
I agree with what Anne-Marie just said. And, here at our program with our future makers, we want them to understand that they have a safe space to give themselves grace and space to experiment. So for me, being resilient is looking for opportunities. You want to not look at an action and outcome as being finite, but what is the opportunity that has come out of the experience that you've had? Whether it is a positive, a negative, or one that wasn't as satisfying as you thought it would be. So looking at all of these different experiences from different point of views, how can you find the takeaway, the learning that will make you better for the next time, give you a different advantage? Some may look at the word of resiliency and believe it means to overcome quickly, to bounce back. And I think that if you take that as the purest form of the definition of the word, it leaves a person open to feeling as if they didn't succeed if they didn't immediately bounce back. Sometimes there's setbacks, there are things that come up that a hurdle that you can't get over immediately. So being able to self-define the time that you need to achieve your goals. It was mentioned earlier about imposter syndrome. Removing that terminology from our lexicon and being able to understand that we all have skills and proficiencies that are beneficial, and knowing that each person here on this call has a different skill set, right? Some have developed it, have spent more time developing it, and so therefore they may be able to do things more quickly. But being able to give ourselves that grace, that space to understand that we are on a different path and a different timeline to achieve, I think that brings in the well-being and how you can overcome adversity.
Thank you very much, Kesia. Take out the learning, take away the takeaway, and that positions you in an advantage position. I love that out of adversity, actually, the learning positions you in an advantaged position the next time around. I love that. Kiara, so tell me about how you've been dealing with resilience.
Yeah, I think as a young woman, I think resilience is something that I've had to experience and that I feel a lot, especially in, with everything going on in the world constantly. As a young woman, it can kind of feel like, oh, it's always that sense of deflation. And even with the project, we're talking about menstruation, something that I've never talked about with any of my peers, with any of my teachers. And all of a sudden, I'm standing on a kind of on this lone platform talking about things, and people are looking at me going, what is she doing? But that's kind of crazy. And getting those looks from people teaches me definitely, and everyone who works on the project, it teaches us to be resilient, because even though they're awkward conversations, even though you're kind of pursuing change, but put your feet in the ground and remind yourself that it's okay and you are resilient and that you can keep going with this. So I think for me, resilience is just keeping my feet in the ground and not having a setback or someone looking at me funny, saying, okay, I'm throwing this all in the bag, forget the project. So for me, it's keeping my feet in the ground and reminding myself that what I'm doing is change, it's making change, and it's pursuing good. But I want to talk about the well-being a bit more, because as I said, a young person, I often get told, oh, you've no problems. And I think that's something a lot of young people receive, is that, oh, you don't know the definition of tired or the definition of hard work. And I think as a young person, that is so damaging, because just for me, I'm a young person in university, full-time education. I run this initiative with a fantastic group of girls. I also work part-time. So, you're trying to find the time to breathe. And when you kind of yawn, someone might go, oh, get over it. You're young. You've got so much energy. But sometimes you don't have energy. And I think surrounding yourself with people who will give you energy and who will give you time to breathe is so important. So well-being for me as a young person is something that I think we all should encourage to seek more. Now, I know Anne-Marie said, I don't have the time to do my yoga. When I work out, I award myself gold stars. I don't have this strict routine of well-being, as it says. But for me, surrounding myself with my family is so good for me. It makes me feel happy. Surrounding myself with my friends makes me feel happy. I think as well, through the project, partnering with people like Standard Chartered and Futuremakers, having mentors who are so good to you and who give you the time to breathe and grow, it's really important. And I think we do need more of that, and more encouragement should be given to young people to allow them to just take the time to breathe. As I said, we work with young people through the project, so we're educating young boys and girls about menstruation, and it can all be really daunting. It's really scary because you've never been told, and it's a shameful, stigmatized thing. So providing them that space to digest the information and to come to us if they have any questions, or to seek further help if they do have queries or concerns, it's really important. So for me, I will always say, and anyone who knows me is sick of hearing me say this, is just start the conversation. And that's all you can do for your well-being, is initiate the conversation, and you're already creating change. So yeah.
Amazing, 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 amazing. You don't sound like an imposter at all. In fact, you sound like somebody who brings such special gifts to the conversation, and you bring some special personality to every space where you would find yourself. I love what you say about sport, because I think in Farah's testimonial, which she shared with us, one of the big things I picked out from there is support. And educationists have actually defined the time that young people go through, especially during teenage, as a period of storm and stress. And so for anybody to say that young people don't have a problem, it means they don't understand at all. So there you go. It's not a period when they don't have any problems, it's a period when they're dealing with stuff, and what they need is support. And that's what this program is all about. So Futuremakers has got a wonderful ecosystem of staff of the bank, volunteers, mentors, program partners, and just everything you can imagine to make sure that we're making this impact. And I can tell you, in the bank, we're extremely excited about what we can do with this. I'm going to come to you, Kisia. And so you lead a women's entrepreneurship program at a New York college, right? My question is, can you share how you've built resilience into your business and think about well-being in your personal work?
Yeah, there's some similarity between our program and STEM Eds that Anne-Marie runs. So she had just, in her answer previously, had mentioned about the entrepreneurship and the different scenarios where you come across things that you aren't anticipating. So we have a similar viewpoint here at our program. We teach the future makers in our program about coming up with recognizing different options, understanding that there is going to be learnings about that will come about from different experiments that you do. So as they are going through our program and learning about the different facets of creating a business, we give them the tools to understand things around, for example, understanding who your customer is, testing things, doing like A/B testing to get feedback on either product design, app layout, marketing piece, and then taking that information and modifying what they're doing. We also talk to them about the financial side of having a business. So most of our students do not come from wealthy families. The majority of them are working to go to school and to help support their family. So this notion of being a business owner is something new. And for me, I think it is a bonus. It gives them, opens the door to possibilities. And so with that, we start to talk to them early on about finances and how they can start to source funding for their business and also understand the mechanics of managing their finances so that if things come up where you have an issue with a vendor or somebody that was going to invest in you doesn't invest, how do you sort of pivot? How do you overcome those obstacles to stay in business? We additionally, around well-being, we have mentors that work with them to give them support. We also do a lot of community activities to bring them together to make sure that they know that they are supported in this journey of being an entrepreneur, which can be a lonely journey at certain points in time. You may be working with others in your startup, but there are outside of that, there aren't many people in your circles, they find, that understand what being an entrepreneur is and can relate to the stressors that they are experiencing. So we make sure that when they come into the Zahn Center here, that they have that support through mentorship, through their peers, so that they know that there is a safe place to come to try to get those answers to work through.
I really, really love that, Kezia. Entrepreneurship can sometimes be a lonely journey. And, we live in a time where a lot of people, a lot of young people today are not coming into life with that thinking that they just want to get a job and work for somebody. A lot of them are thinking about, how do I start my business? It can be a lonely journey. And I think support is the thing that is coming out from this true resilience, really, is ensuring that the learnings we take from even conversations like these help us not to make the mistakes that other people have made. And I think this is really powerful. It can be a
Okay, I think.
I was going to say the Heathrow Wi-Fi might have given up on Henry.
I think that's
there,
exactly the case. Poor Henry. Hopefully he'll dial back in just a moment. No worries at all. While Henry is sorting out his technology, for everybody listening and participating, I've been in the chat furiously saying, please get your questions in. We really want to hear from you too, because obviously this session is all about sort of really helping you and sharing a sort of two-way conversation. So please do get into that chat and share your thoughts. Whilst Henry is just hopefully joining us, I was wondering whether we could just pick up a little bit on the sort of the next piece in terms of, how actually can we better connect the resilience and well-being that we're building up through our sort of mental health and potentially bring that into some of our work and our sort of financial resilience as well. I was wondering whether perhaps Keisha, you might be able to share a bit about that, because I know that certainly through some of your programs, you sort of build it into your training. And Anne-Marie, feel free to leap in too, and Chiara.
Well, I wanted to, let me start to comment on the well-being side, I think. What I've discovered over the 8 years that we've been part of this partnership with Standard Chartered's Futuremaker initiative is I've been discovering different ways to teach and to lead the participants in our program. 2020 gave everybody a complete reset with this pandemic, and it helped us understand different ways in which we could support our participants in learning. Prior to the pandemic, we were in class, we would have lectures, and we would give assignments. We realized that people are learning in different fashions. And so we've started augmenting our curriculum with things like webinars, with in-person events, through mentor pairing, through peer work. And we're finding, we continue to get learnings, but we're finding different ways to accommodate people. So I think that if we, as organizations, look at how we can best accommodate our participants by asking them more questions, we can find ways to support them and help support them around their well-being. When I look at financial, so the financial well-being of an organization plays a role not only in the health of an organization, but in, I'd say, the health of the founders. When you are financially healthy, there's less stress, right? So we start early on, giving them the tools to understand just some basic accounting terminology. If it's just understanding what expenses are versus what your revenue is, how to do a simple budget. What people may not know is that your personal financial health does play a role in your business financial health. And I don't know if this is the same outside of the US, but in the US, there is a credit reports really guide a lot in terms of how you can access funding, loans, interest rates that you would be charged against. And so giving them that education early on about how to start thinking about balancing a budget, thinking about cash flow, the importance of bringing money in to cover your expenses, is things that we cover not only with our college students, but with our high school students as well. And I see Henry's back.
Thank you, Keisha. Yeah, Henry, you are back. You may have missed one teeny tiny question, which is just about that connection between personal well-being and also your sort of financial health there. So Henry, back to you, and Anne-Marie and Chiara, if you wanted to respond to that question too, feel free to leap in.
Brilliant. Okay, Anne-Marie, did you want to touch on that subject as well?
Well, I think Chiara wanted to go first.
Okay, Chiara.
Yeah, no, I just want to kind of touch on what Keisha said there about, you know, your project being, or your entrepreneur project being in a kind of good place, but your financial health might be in a bad place. I think that's something that I've learned is really important with any time of the month, because obviously I'm not a finance student, I'm a European studies student, so I'm all about law, politics and history, airy fairy arts, you know, and I love it. But if you showed me a calculator, I would immediately panic, and I would be like, oh my God, like I panic at my bank account, and I'm like, like, you know, it's all very scary and daunting to me. But I think in terms of like with organizations like Enactus and with the Futuremakers program, you kind of learn to not be scared of your finances. And that's something that I've projected into kind of the other team members, and that we teach to young people, even kind of in a small, tiny segment, not to be scared of your finances, and that, you know, if you look after yourself, then you'll be okay. And I think we can apply that to anything, really. If you look after yourself, then you're going to project greatness and be okay. But that's just something I wanted to touch on because I thought it was really important what you said. Yeah.
I just wanted to jump in there with Kiara about it being scary.
Yeah.
I get that, and we get that a lot from our students. And one of the things that we do here is we make sure that the examples that we use are really relatable, and sometimes are a little silly, so that it takes away that apprehension of, oh my gosh, I'm not a finance major, I'm not an accounting major, I can't do this.
Exactly.
And once we make it a bit more palatable, they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and that's the reaction all the time. And I can tell you right now, that was the reaction from me. I was like, oh, it's actually not the scariest thing in the world. It's just numbers. So yeah, definitely.
I think for me it's an interesting one. I mean, maths is my thing. So even though I'm not an accountant, the numbers just still talk to me, which frustrates my accountant quite a lot, but it is what it is. I think with us, with the journey that we take our young people on, I think there's kind of two sides to it. One is, you know, if it's not everyone can do everything in their business. And so actually it's okay if it's not something that you're fully au fait with, or you're fully, you know, on board with. You know, there'll be certain things that, you know, there's a learning, there's, you know, growth for you in being able to get the basics, but actually having an accountant, having a bookkeeper, having the right kind of structures that you can trust, that you can, you know, check when you need to check, or ask the right questions to ensure that people aren't pulling the wool over your eyes. I think that's one thing that's really important. But I think the other thing that we kind of can't shy away from, and I don't want to kind of missell this really to anybody listening in, and I know we're not, Casey and Kiara, we've all been, you know, really, really honest and really frank with folks. But I think the other thing is, you know, that is the journey of an entrepreneur, is being certain with that uncertainty. And so actually that's why it's part of that resilience, that sometimes it is boom or bust. Sometimes you will lose everything, and it has to be that kind of thing that you're okay to do in some way. It's a calculated risk to say, rather than me going to work for someone, I'm going to be in charge of that income. I'm going to be in charge of the outgoings. I'm going to be in charge of that for, you know, my team, or, you know, for the freelancers that I'm working with, or whatever it might be. And, you know, someone that's, you know, Stemetz has been going for 10 years now. So I've been riding that roller coaster for 10 years, you know, on behalf of other people. And I think it is something that you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And, you know, when you see this in really big business, you know, the number of times that you see, you know, layoffs or restructuring or all kinds of things in the news, then, you know, just because you're a really big company, not Standard Chartered, but, you know, just because you're a really huge company doesn't mean that, you know, you're not still having to figure out month on month, you know, how are we paying everybody? How are we keeping the lights on? How are we covering rent? Are we ensuring that we can pay those suppliers while we wait for those, you know, incoming clients to pay? And, you know, cash, like there's all of these elements of it that actually, I think sometimes, you know, you end up realizing that the lessons that you learn in business are more complicated than the lessons you needed to learn for running your own purse, because you don't have sales tax to manage, you know, you don't have corporation tax at the end, you know, it's different, of course, in different locales, and the way that the government collects the tax and all the rest of that is very different. But, you know, as a human being, actually, you know, managing that financial resilience is a walk in the park when you consider that you're starting an enterprise and you're having to do that on a whole nother level for a whole nother set of people. And so, you know, definitely go into all of this with your eyes open. It's a big part of what you're going to have to do. And sometimes, you know, and in case I'm sure you have had this, sometimes folks, they realize that maybe entrepreneurship in that full form isn't for them, but there's so many transferable skills that mean that whether it's the marketing, whether it's the legal element, whether it's the business development, whether it's the creativity, even if it's the finance, you can then be an intrapreneur, or you can just be entrepreneurial in particular things that you're working on, which again contributes to what, you know, resilience could mean to you on your journey. So, you know, it's not necessarily always for the faint-hearted, but, you know, just know sometimes you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think that's a resilience. That's pro-resilience, maybe anti-well-being in some ways.
Wow. No, I wouldn't consider that to be anti-well-being. I think it's amazing how you put it. Being certain with uncertainty, being comfortable with uncertainty. And I think it's amazing because someone else has said that, in every uncertain situation, there is an opportunity. So, it's wonderful the way you put it, being certain with uncertainty. And that links to something you said earlier, right? That adversity is not the thing we run away from, but adversity is something we lean into and overcome it. So adversity is meant to be overcome. I've been a banker for all these years. I've had opportunity where I've met with our clients who started their own business. And we as bankers go in with our theoretical knowledge of how we think those businesses run, what the risks are. And this person has been running business and they can tell you all the nooks and crannies of the business, tell you all the plumbing around the business, and you don't have a clue, but they understand it, even though they may not be able to state it in strange mathematical ways or accounting ways of a balance sheet and everything. They understand that business more than anyone can do. So for all of you who are doing business, that confidence of understanding your business is a big part of how you build your own resilience. And I'm going to stay with you for a while, Anne-Marie, because I'd like to ask a question about skills and also about the role of mentors. And I'm sure Kiara will talk a bit also about the role of mentors, and so will Kesia. So just tell me, what kinds of skills do you think are the most important in your experiences that young people need to build in order to develop their resilience and their well-being?
It's a great question, and I say it's great because it's about the building the skills, not just gaining skills or attaining skills. Because I think sometimes we feel like it's on and off, whereas actually these things should always be a progression. There should always be a growth. So I think in terms of skills, communication is definitely the number one skill, and being able to communicate with lots of different people in lots of different ways across lots of different platforms. I mean, we've got this now, we're all in different places, we're communicating here. It would be very different if I was in a room with everybody, if, I had a slide. And so being able to communicate is definitely one of those big skills to be able to develop and grow and evolve as you go into business, as you go in life. I think collaboration is the other one. So being able to genuinely work with others where, you're greater than the sum of your parts, right? And being able to see that and say, actually, whether it's you're the accountant in that example, or whether it's with your co-founders, whether it's with a team, most things, most change, most businesses, it's not just you on your own. You need to be able to work with others and truly collaborate with them. It's like the 3 C's, I think. And then creativity is another skill. So being able to innovate, being able to come up with new ideas, being able to not just say it's a new idea, but actually it's an old method in a new space, or it's a new method in an old space, and being able to see all of those different types of creativity, but also being able to draw on all the things that you as a young person with your perspective, with your experiences can bring. And I think this is something that's really, it's so lovely to hear Kira talking about periods before me. And normally I always talk about periods when I get to do these things, because there's so many things that we can know and understand and can learn about periods. But actually it's such a taboo that we've been unable to tap into that for so long as society, as humankind, where, the regularity of periods or the irregularity of periods or the things that happen around them, there's so many parallels I know that folks could be able to draw. Or whether it's the part of the world that you're in, there's lots of different parts of our perspectives and our experiences that add to the value that we can bring in creative processes. And so being able to value what you bring, know what you bring, and be able to be creative with that with others is really important. But I think when we talk about skills, it's also and mentoring, which is kind of the other part of your question, which we do have as part of the work that we do with Standard Chartered Futuremakers. In fact, I think we just held a graduation just last week, I think, for the latest cohort of mentees on our Standard Chartered partnership. But I think the other thing is considering, a mentor is someone that gives advice, right? A mentor is someone who may have been there before, maybe is just ahead. You've got peer mentors, so maybe they're doing it just as you're doing it. But actually, I always talk about a holy trinity of a coach, that is, people that are working on specific skills, whether it's public speaking, whether it's coaching you in accounting, all those kinds of things. That, having someone that works on a very specific skill, having a mentor who is someone that gives you advice that's been there before. And then the third prong is having a sponsor. And this is someone who it's not about money, really, actually, when we talk about careers and when we talk about building your business. Sponsorship is, a mentor gives you advice that when you get to that opportunity or when you get to that space, here's what to do. Whereas a sponsor opens that door and puts you in that space to be able to use that advice. And so this is what we kind of experiment with, what we talk through with folks is, it's great to have mentors for your business and have that as a normal relationship, part of the network that you're building around you for this resilience, for this success. But also, how do you work to communicate and to be visible for folks who can sponsor you, who can say, yeah, I'm going to put you forward for this program because I've seen, how you've operated, or what the skills are that you've had, or the way that you handled that, or people who are able to put you forward for awards, people who are able to nominate you, people who might nudge the bank manager and say, actually, that's someone who should get that loan, or that's someone who should get this publicity. And so I think that's the other thing to kind of think about is, these skills are all transient. You can coach other people. You should coach other people on things that you're good at, because then, you're reinforcing the skills that you have, and you might learn something from them as part of the coaching that's part of your evolution. You should be mentoring. Everyone in this webinar is somewhere that somewhere else wants to be. And so how are you handing things, to mentees, as well as how are you taking things from mentors, but also sponsors? And this is something that I always say to folks, it's not when you're the big CEO, it's not when you reach the top that you want that to be the first time that you ever sponsor someone, right? Learn to do it in the small, so then you're well practiced when it gets to the big. And so again, each of us has a sphere of influence. Each of us has people that listen to us. Each of us has people that respect us. Each of us has people that that look up to us. And so what are we doing to sponsor for those folks? What are we doing to wield that influence and use that influence? So when others do it for us, we can recognize it, right? And so, and it becomes part and parcel of the way that we do business. And I think, especially when we look at women, which is kind of the focus group again that we're talking about today, this is something that we tend to do in certain ways, we don't do in other ways. And so I think finding the way that works for you as a woman, if you're listening to this, or whoever it is, that this is the way I'm comfortable in coaching folks. This is the way and the space that I have where I'm comfortable in mentoring. This is the way I'm going to sponsor people, that next time there's an event happening, I'm going to say that person should be on the stage and be on the panel rather than, and this is the thing. Each of us has had someone sponsor us. That's why we're here on this seat. And so again, the challenge, the skill to develop is, how do you do that for others? And it's one of those things that, with some people might believe in karma, others may not, but it's one of those things that then comes back to you, right? As you're doing that, it comes back and it becomes this nice, big, powerful, agency-filled cycle that is about making the future. And so that for me, that's what always excites me when I'm working with our young people.
Anne-Marie, I absolutely believe your last statement. The more you sponsor others, the more you get sponsored. It's a reality I've experienced, and I have countless examples of how that has worked. So don't wait until you get to the top to think that you have the capacity to sponsor others. Start today. And I think if there is any takeout, that should be one of them, right? Now, if you have any questions, we're going to get into the QA session immediately after the next comments from Kisia and Kiara. And so you can pop up your questions in the chat box, and we have two wonderful colleagues who will be providing some answers on the chat box. Brian Hyman and John Finmela, they will be providing some responses, but Anne-Marie, Kiara, and Kisia are also here to provide you some answers. So if you have any questions, just after here, or even now, between now and when Kiara and Kisia are providing the next set of responses, you can put it out there. So Kiara, you have been at the receiving end of mentorship. Tell me how you have experienced that.
I think before I answer that, I just want to kind of touch on what Anne-Marie said there. Like, you were just dinging so many points for me. I think definitely the sphere of influence is something really, really important. And, like mentoring, having someone mentor you, it's kind of like a domino effect. You will mentor someone else. And that's something definitely that we bring in any time of the month, and in my personal life as well. Like I said a few moments ago, my key phrase is start the conversation. So with Futuremakers program, it's about starting that conversation with your mentor. I would like to do this. I kind of want to go into this area. How do I do it? I receive the advice there, and then I go on and work with the team, and we work with young people, and it's a star is born. So there's so many great things. And I think as well, the sphere of influence, it's so important with a mentor, because as I'm repeating myself because it's all really important, but like, when someone tells you something good, you'll do something good with it. And I think, especially with any time of the month, we are talking about menstruation, and it's it's so taboo and it's crippling sometimes. But again, with your resilience, you'll stand your ground and say, no, we are going to talk about this and we are going to extend our sphere of influence. So for me, my family, my friends, mentors have all been so important in allowing me to, you know, build my resilience and just kind of give my sphere of influence and suffocate everyone with it. So yeah.
Amazing. Kisia, so about skills and about mentorship, how have you experienced this?
Well, I could say both personally and in our program. I think that it's very important. It's one of the great pillars of, I think, a successful career, both academically and professionally. So I don't know if it was Anne-Marie or Kiara who said that we are all here on this panel because somebody said our name in a room and said that they thought we should be here. So I've benefited from having all three of those individuals that Anne-Marie mentioned, coaches, mentors, and sponsors. And because I understand the value of that, I make it a central component of the programming that we do here. So whether it's individual pairing of mentors that we do, whether it's offering flexible office hours for students to request additional time and support, bringing in individuals to do panel discussions or fireside chats with our future makers are ways that we involve our mentors. I say here that a lot of people, everybody wants to be a mentor, but not everybody can be a mentor. And it's similar to the point earlier about being an entrepreneur. Some people think that they want to be until they get into the space and realize some of the challenges, and it's not for them. I would love to see more training around how to be a good mentor, how to be a good sponsor. What does that look like? I think that through the Future Makers initiative, there are a number of key activities that they do that work really well and could serve as a model for other programs involving mentoring and support for young people to succeed in their professional and academic careers.
Thank you very much, Kisia. We're now setting up ourselves for any questions that people might have. One of the things that really just jumped at me, Kisia, when you were making that submission, is that all of us will be spoken about in the room when we are not there. All of us will be spoken about in the room when we're not there. And the question I'm asking myself is, what really counts? What are they going to be talking about? They'll probably be talking about our track record. They'll be talking about our attitude. They'll be talking about the potential that is seen in us. And they'll be talking generally about the relationships. These things will be influenced by the kind of relationships we've built. And so when you're not in the room and you're being talked about, what is the foundation that we've set to ensure that the right conversations are being had about us? And I think that's really, really, really powerful. So whilst we're looking to see if any questions at all are coming up on the chat, one of the things that I was thinking about is that now, when one starts a business, it is always a very tricky time. Some of the statistics have suggested that in the first few years of the startup of every business, they fail. So based on the experiences you've had working with young people who start business, and every conversation we're having today seems to suggest that that's going to be the most difficult period, right? When you're building your resilience, you're learning, you're getting to understand the business and so on. So based on your experiences, what would you tell young people who are within the first few years or few months of starting a business? What kind of advice would you give them?
Well, we tell them that this is a journey and it's not a sprint. And there are going to be times where things are going to be going very smoothly and you're going to be making some great progress. And then there are going to be times where you feel as though you're not moving. I think people look at the headlines and how entrepreneurship and startups have been sort of glamorized, where, oh, so-and-so has just received this great investment and is now valued as $1 billion unicorn and all. And when you talk to those founders now, the amnesia sets in about all the trials and tribulations that they had to go through to get to that point. For many startups, it may take a couple of years before you see positive return on your investment, before you start to actually generate some revenue. What we tell them is that, your course, your path is going to be different from others. But if you keep your eye on your North Star as to why you want to do this and stay focused on serving the customer, right? It will come. If you work on trying to make that sale, trying to acquire the customer to get the customer to return, that's how you'll build the business. As opposed to spending a lot of time or focusing a lot on investing. Yes, we do need money to support our business, but to stay focused on the building of the business in line with what the customer's needs are, the success will come.
Wow, this cannot be said enough. Focus on the customer. Keep your eye on the North Star. And remember that your path will be different from others. So I'm going to, we have a number of questions that have come up in the chat. And if you're hearing some background noise, just let me remind you that I'm in the lounge in an airport. And so you will hear some lovely background noise from time to time. But there are 3 questions there that I'd like to throw before I ask each one of my panelists to say their final words to all of us. And the first question is for Kiara. Obviously, Kiara, you're very popular on this panel. And the question for you is, you have talked about your well-being and the support system that you get. And somebody's asking if you could share a bit more about the support systems, family, and friends. The other question for Kisia is, you spoke about adapting the way you teach to better meet the needs of young people over the years. What is the biggest lesson you have all learned from the young people you work with, which has helped you to stay resilient in your own work? And there is a general question which I will give to Anne-Marie, which says, do you have any top tips for finding a mentor and or a sponsor for those who are seeking one? There is one person, Felix Zulu from Zambia, who is asking how he could also get an SC mentor in Lusaka. I'm sure we will reach out to you specifically on the Zambia piece, but the question of do you have any top tips for finding a mentor will help you as well. So I'm going to go first to Kiara and to say, tell us a bit more about the support system.
Yeah, so like I've been mentioning, like a broken record, this whole panel discussion, my support system is probably the most important thing to me. I'm going to talk about my family a bit first. I am the first in my immediate family to go to university. I'm the first to pursue a career in kind of political area. I'm the first one who's kind of got a mind for all this. So it's been really daunting. Like when I came home in my first year of college and I said to my mom, oh, I'm going to start talking about menstruation, she laughed and she was like, good luck. I hope you enjoy your time. And then the more that I worked a night time in the month, the more kind of open that she became to it. And now I'm not saying my mom is anti-menstruation. She is not. But I suppose she just had that taboo and she was scared, my young daughter starting in entrepreneurship about menstruation. What, So my support system definitely has had to grow. I think with my friends as well, I have a fantastic network of friends, But at the start, it was daunting. It was scary. Like, what is Kira doing? But now we see, and we've all learned. My whole support system has learned from me. They go on with their sphere of influence and they teach others. So my support system is really important for me because it allows me to grow, but it also reminds me where I came from. It always grounds me, because like today, like I mentioned, when I'm sitting on a panel with people like this, I'm like screaming inside and I'm like, how am I here? But with the opportunities provided to me by the Futuremaker programs and opportunities that I've had with Enactus Ireland and just different things like talk shows or radio interviews, I'm like, oh my God, what this is all amazing. But I think my support system grounds me in a way, and it goes, yes, you deserve this success, but look to your friends and don't ever forget about them. And I think that's something that sometimes young people can get lost in terms of their entrepreneurial projects. It's this great success, but we also have to look back and think, it's our family and our friends and the people who stood by us from the very beginning. I would like to give a special mention to Hind from Standard Chartered for me, because she's just always stood by and been that kind of light that's reminded me, keep going and pursue these things. So yeah, really important people. And I don't mean for you to be surrounded by people who are constantly nice to you. But sometimes you need someone to be mean to you and say, this was a silly financial decision, or I don't think you should do that. So kind of balance it out. My dad is a great balance for me, but that's just him. So yeah, that would be my answer to that.
Sometimes dads are supposed to do that. and shout outs to Hind. Hind is definitely an amazing colleague we have in Standard Chartered. A big shout outs to him. So let me just go to Kisia to talk about when teaching young people. What's the biggest lesson you have learned from the young people you work with, Kisia?
So I approach our program similar to how I tell our young founders, startup founders, to approach their business, is to keep the customer first. And for me, my customers are my students. So I am always trying to figure out the best way to be of service to them and to make sure that they have the most positive experience from our program. I think that the biggest lesson I've learned is how to be flexible without sacrificing the rigor and the outcomes of our programming. I've learned how to make material more accessible in varieties of different ways to our students, trying to accommodate different ways that they learn. I've also mentioned about us, so with the support of mentors, providing that mentorship support. Experiential learning, I think, is really key here, and constant feedback, and trying to recognize when they are hesitant to ask for help, and to be able to offer it to them in a way that they will accept it. So it's the tightrope that I walk, but with every new cohort that comes in, I learn a bit more about how to service.
Wow, that's really deep. Know when people are hesitant to ask for help. Asking for help is so important. So it's important to know when people are hesitant. Now, going to you, Anne-Marie, do you have any top tips for finding a mentor and/or sponsor for those who are seeking one?
I do, and I have to add to the shout out, the round of shout outs to Hind. So big shout out to Hind from me as well, and from the Stimets team, and all of our young people. So for the top tips, I'd say we have a Stimets zine actually that I know we've written some content on that I can pop in the chat actually for everybody to kind of head over to and can search on there. We've got lots of content on mentoring, making the most of a mentor, finding a mentor. I'd say there's kind of two main ways. One that's the easiest one, if if you're genuinely starting from the beginning, is there are so many mentoring schemes out there. There are a lot of mentoring programs. Actually, there's lots of places where you can sign up and where people have done the hard work for you to find people who are willing to be mentors, who have the time, someone that's going to chase folks up and make sure that both sides are okay, and a really formal, structured program. So, have a look. We at Stemets have a mentoring program that we're doing with Standard Chartered. We've got lots of different spaces, lots of places. You've got virtual mentoring, you've got physical mentoring. So have a look there. You always make the most from a mentoring relationship if you have a particular question. It doesn't have to be a big question or a detailed question, but if you have something that you're looking for as to start that journey, to start that relationship, then you always kind of will make a lot from it. So, and that might help you guide to see which of the programs you see when you get on Google or search on social media or whatever it might be for mentoring in Zambia or wherever it might be. So have a search, have a look for existing programs and ask around. I mean, you're on this webinar, so you probably know someone that maybe knows someone that runs one. So whoever invited you here, ask them about mentoring programs that they know are out there. I think the second way is to approach folks. And I always say, you don't just have one mentor, you end up having lots of them. And some of them you'll never talk to. Sometimes actually, listening to some interviews or reading through interviews or, listening to someone's podcast is enough of that kind of mentorship that you didn't need to have a two-way conversation, but you've picked up advice and you've heard it in the right kind of context that means it's useful for you. But I think the kind of second way is approaching folks and asking them and being like, hey, I love what you said on that, or that was really useful. It'd be great, if there's any time for me to talk about X, Y, and Z, or ask, or, if there's anyone you'd have or anyone that I could talk to about a particular topic. And again, help the mentor help you. Like it's nice to get a DM every now and then saying, hey, Anne-Marie, you were great and I want to build an app, and can I have advice on an app? And it's like, well, actually, I don't know that that's necessarily going to be the best use of time for both of us, so have a think, be very specific. What is it about that app? And then that means that I can then help and pass you on to someone, or I can, tell you where to go and look in the right kind of environment to seek out that mentor. Now the question, there was also a part there about sponsors. And I think this is always a really big difference actually between mentors and sponsors, is that you can ask someone to be your mentor, but you can't ask someone to be your sponsor. I didn't ask someone to say, hey, there's a Standard Chartered event and I really want to be there. Like that's not how sponsorship works. Sponsorship means that you, someone also mentioned the book, and I do have a book out later on this year where I'll talk a little bit about this, but with sponsorship, you have to be visible. That person has to see that there's something to sponsor. And so actually, instead of working on making those connections and connecting out to folks, you need to work on, again, how do you communicate what you're thinking? How do you communicate what you're doing? How do you communicate what you're capable of and what you've achieved? And we're really fortunate to be alive when we've got this thing called the internet. That's available to a lot of us at the moment. And so actually, whether it's using LinkedIn, whether it's using Twitter, whether it's using GitHub, if you're that way inclined, and using these platforms, not to say about the sandwich you ate, or to share something random thought from your head today, but I was on this panel, here's what I learned, here's why it was useful. Or I've just finished this course, here's what I did, here's why it was important to me, here's what I'm going to do next. Or I've had this thought and I've been working on this project and here's where we've got to so far. And you need to almost give people those reasons to sponsor you. And then that's something that needs to be coming from them rather than coming from you. So that's the big difference between them. So that's what you kind of need to keep in mind. Hopefully that was enough. Yeah.
That was useful. Thank you very much, Anne-Marie. Inspirational as always. Unfortunately, we're running out of time and we're going to bring this to a close. I have learned a ton of things from this conversation, and I hope that everyone is inspired as I have been. I'm going to ask each one of you to just in one sentence, just what would be your closing thoughts to this wonderful audience that we've had here this afternoon. Kiara, go for it.
Thanks. I think for me, start the conversation. Start that awkward conversation. That's definitely it for me.
Anne-Marie?
Mine would be, and I kind of say this to go back to the statistics you shared at the top. It's like tough times will happen. That's not the news. And so I think it is kind of for everybody here, like, what am I gonna, the next time I face that tough time, what's the laundry list of things that I'm gonna use to kind of, use a bounce from that tough time. Yeah, you will run out of money. Things will, we have this thing in Nigeria, right? Katakata will bust. Like it will happen. It's what are you gonna do when that happens? That would be my one piece of advice. Like that is what resilience is about. What do you do when the chips are down? And how do you prepare and practice for when those chips will be down? So when they do inevitably come down, you're ready to go.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. And Kezia?
Perfection is a mythical creature. It doesn't exist. So don't be afraid of failure. Embrace it, because out of there comes opportunity.
Wonderful, wonderful. Wonderful. So sometimes you will run out of money, you will run out of resources, and you will run out of time. But when you face adversity, don't run away, because adversity is a thing you need to lean into and overcome it. But remember to give yourself space and time, because therein lies your well-being, because therein lies what nourishes you. And you always have to ask the question when you face adversity, what is the opportunity that has come out of this? What is the takeaway? And how does that put me in an advantageous position? If just in case you think that young people don't have problems, it's a period of storm and stress, and the biggest gift you can give them is support. Entrepreneurship can be a lonely journey, and it comes with lots of periods of uncertainty, but you've got to learn to be certain in uncertainty. Know what you bring to the conversation and be confident about what you bring. Mentors give you advice, sponsors open doors for you. Your name will be mentioned when you're not in the room, by the way. And the question is, what is being said about you in that room? Your path is definitely going to be different from others, so keep your eye on the North Star and focus always on serving your clients. These are just a few of the things I was able to write down in the course of this conversation. But what a wonderful conversation it's been, and what an amazing lots and lots of nuggets that have been dropped through this conversation. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you, Kezia, thank you, Anne-Marie, and thank you, Kiara. Thank you, our wonderful audience who've been interactive throughout the session, and thank you, our colleagues in the background who have been helping us answer some of the questions.